G'day, I'm Kathy. This is where I talk about my plants and all my other pet projects. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a return visitor, I really appreciate you guys coming back. So today's video is going to be a little bit difficult for me. I'm going to be talking about the challenges of being in a wheelchair and looking after houseplants. In case you're not aware of it, I'm actually in a wheelchair scooter. Not a wheelchair per se, a wheelchair scooter, which I use inside the house as well as outside. Now, I need to point out right at the beginning that the challenges that I face won't necessarily be the same challenges that other people face, because it all depends on what kind of disability they have. My condition is such that I can stand for short periods of time, but I can't really walk very far. And it also affects both my arms, hands, legs and feet, so I'm not very strong either. And what works for me may not necessarily work for other people. So let's start with why I decided to get into houseplants. There are several reasons. I've always had something in my home, never a lot, usually one or two. I had one for 20 years and then Maya, my cat, killed it. So she was in the black books for quite a while. But I've always had at least one plant, but honestly, I never really paid much attention to them. I think I was plant blind for a long time. I've always loved nature. I've always loved going to the ocean, going to forests, things like that. But unfortunately, ever since I've been in a wheelchair, I find it very difficult to visit those places. And sometimes I did feel a disconnect from nature, particularly since I've been living in this house. For 4 years, I couldn't even get into my backyard. It wasn't accessible whatsoever. It was only recently that I had a deck built. Now at least I can sit outside and enjoy some of the sun. So for the longest time, I actually didn't think I could look after houseplants. I thought it was really beyond me. But one day I was visiting my cousin Jim and his wife Trinity in their home, and he has a lot of houseplants, and I was just overwhelmed by the wonderful feeling it gave me. And it really inspired me. He inspired me. So with his encouragement, I decided to try my hand at it. So I bought a couple of plants to start off with, and it kind of has exploded since then. However, because I am in a wheelchair, there are a lot of limitations as to what kind of plants I can get and where I can put them in my house. I had to really think about whether they would be accessible or not. And I definitely can't just put them anywhere. I had to put them somewhere where I can still get around without having to move things. So that is definitely one thing that you need to consider if you are in a wheelchair or have a disability, is to ensure that you have somewhere to put your plants that won't interfere with your getting around the place. Another challenge that I faced is that I'm quite weak in the arms, so I can't really carry anything very heavy. So I found that terracotta is far too heavy for me, even small pots unfortunately, especially once they're wet. And I had to really think about how I'm going to be able to look after my plants. So what works for me is I put all my plants in nursery plastic containers, and I usually use ceramic pots as cash pots. So then I can just take out the plastic pot, take it to the sink, which is how I like to water it there, wait until the excess water drains away, and then I return the pot to the ceramic pot. Another thing that I had to think about is I can't bend down and pick things up from the floor, so I use things like tables, my desk, sideboards, plant stands, side tables, coffee tables, kitchen bench, anything that is at a certain height, which allows me to be able to pick up the plant. So what do I do with bigger plants? I have a carer who comes in 3 times a week who helps me with all the plants that I can't actually get to physically, like the big and heavy plants, or the ones that are in my hanging baskets. If I didn't have a carer, I'd ask one of my friends or family to help me with those plants that I can't get to myself. And I would definitely suggest that you do that if you're struggling with certain plants. Alternatively, you just choose plants that you know that you can look after yourself. And if you're limited in space or you have difficulty with bigger pots, you can always get smaller plants. You don't need to buy big fiddle leaf figs. I always refer to fiddle leaf figs, which I don't even like. But anyway, you don't need to get big plants. So you could always get little plants, something like this, which I think is adorable. This is a Haworthia. Zabrina, I think, but don't quote me. But this is a beautiful little plant. It's very light, so I don't have any trouble lifting it, and it can go anywhere. So you can always add smaller plants if you think you might struggle with bigger pots or bigger plants. Now, if you can see a pot up here on top of my bookshelf, let me just say that's fake. That was before I started collecting plants. I just like the look of it, so it stays there. But I definitely can't access that. Some of my hanging baskets, I actually have them lower so I can actually get to them. And then I also have some that are much higher. Those, I definitely need to ask someone to get them down for me. I have actually seen that there are pulley systems that you can buy to hang your plants from. I haven't actually tried them. They look a little flimsy to me. But if anyone else has, let me know down in the comments how that goes, because that is also an option. The other one is to hang your plants a little bit lower so that you can actually get to them rather than putting them too high. Problem with that is you can knock your head into them, which I've done as well. Another thing that I had to think about is because I have got limited space and because a lot of places aren't accessible for me, it meant that I couldn't get as many plants as I would like to have. And I really didn't want to have a lot of plants that my carers or other people had to help me with. I wanted to be able to get to them myself and be able to look at them, clean them, do whatever I needed to do. Plus I have a lot of bookshelves. Really, I've got no free walls in my house, so I've had to find nook and crannies as to where I can put plants. Okay, sorry for the wardrobe change, but I got interrupted yesterday, so I couldn't finish this video. Another thing I wanted to point out is that no matter how much I love plants and looking after them, it is tiring. And the more plants you have, the more tiring it will be, which is why I don't have 100 or 200 plants. In addition to which, it will take me twice as long, 3 times as long as other people to look after that many plants. Okay, now I wanted to talk about gardening outdoors. I have 2 yards. I have a front yard and a backyard. My front yard is accessible, but for 4 years, my backyard wasn't. I had a deck built around 18 months ago now, and since then I have been able to access some of my backyard. I have a table on the backyard, which is full of plants, which constantly changes. I have a trolley on which there are more plants, and it also allows me to have supplies there like secateurs or a watering can, things like that. And I also have stacks of bricks on which I have more plants because they give me that certain height so I can access all the plants. I had to have my taps moved, both in the front and the backyard, because where they were I couldn't get to them. So I had a plumber come in and move them to a place where I can then access them. I also had to buy attachments for the taps so that I could turn them on and off more easily. I find these invaluable, and I would definitely recommend it if you're having trouble turning your taps on or off. In the front yard, I have what is called, I believe, Easy Tap Turner, and it lives up to its name because it definitely is easy. I also have a retractable hose, which makes watering so much easier. Basically, I can just pull out the hose, water what I need to, and then it will retract automatically. So that has really been useful. When I had the backyard overhauled, we got rid of all the old grass, garden beds and started all over again, we also installed a sprinkler system to make it easier for me to water. And in order to be able to access the sprinkler system, I needed a two-way splitter on my tap, one which has a timer on it and one for the hose. I initially had a brass one, which I found really hard to use, and I found this hard plastic one, which for me has made life a lot easier. I also bought attachments for my hose, including a wand. I think that's what it's called. It's a watering wand which attaches to the hose, and that has been a total game changer. It allows me to water everything on my deck, even my hanging baskets from my wheelchair. So I really love it. I find it incredibly useful. So all my potted plants and everything on my deck is pretty much accessible to me. However, I can't access my garden beds. Now I know that you can have raised garden beds, but it's just the way my backyard is structured with certain angles, it wouldn't matter. I still wouldn't be able to access them. But raised garden beds are an option for anyone who can't get to the ground, like me. So because I can't access my garden bed or do the mowing, I have a gardener who comes in every 3 to 4 weeks. Hi Grant. Big shout out to Grant. He is wonderful. He does a fantastic job. And honestly, without him, I couldn't have a garden. Regardless of all the aids that I've bought or how I've tried to ensure that my gardens are accessible, there are still certain things that I simply can't do. Weeding is one of them, which just drives me crazy. I hate that I can't do the weeding, that I can't keep my gardens looking neat and tidy. But that unfortunately is just the way it is. If, however, anyone knows of a product that I can buy that, say, has a long handle which will allow me to weed from the wheelchair, please do let me know. I would really appreciate it. I have been on the hunt, but I haven't had any success finding anything yet. Okay. Now it might sound that there are a lot of challenges in looking after plants. And there are. I can't deny it. That is the truth. But regardless, I have found that looking after plants has been one of the most rewarding things I have done in a very long time. It's very hard to describe what it gives you. I feel a serenity, a calmness when I look after plants, like I'm part of something greater. So if you think that you can't look after plants like I did for far too long, think again about it. You just need to realistically evaluate what your limitations are and try to find ways to overcome them. And I think those of us with disabilities are really, really good at that. What I'm trying to convey here is that if you are hesitating about getting plants or gardening, don't be like me and wait far too many years and then regret that you didn't start earlier. Because honestly, the rewards are worth it. It has just enriched my life so much more. Well, I really don't know how useful this video was. I have to admit, it was really difficult to film. But if I've inspired even one person to think about getting houseplants or gardening outdoors, then I would be really satisfied. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Until next time, take care, guys. Bye.